Hello again, everyone. Dr. Noir here. Just to say, as our online festival has been going on, you may notice that authors get rather excited about aspects of their work, about being in lockdown, and sometimes maybe some little swear words pop out there. I think it actually reflects the fact that, we are very relaxed in our conversations, and possibly the lack of a live audience as well. I know no offence has been intended, and I hope none's taken. I hope it's not spoiled in any way your enjoyment of our time together at NN2020 online festival. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Am I Losing My Mind panel for part 2 of Newcastle Noir Online Mini Festival here 2020. Probably the most apt title of all the panels that we're hosting this month, given that we're all in lockdown. I hope that you are all well and safe, and that doing these book weekends that we've been doing, and I know other great people have been doing them, just keep you a little bit sane. Anyway, for this panel, I have with me, I have Louise Candlish, I have Lisa Ballantyne, I have Barbara Copperthwaite, and I have Sara Stovell. Four fabulous authors who, to my mind, have shown us what it is to write fabulous psychological thrillers, and what it is we've taken what some have deemed a detrimental label of grip lit and have shown us that actually, no, this is no secondary form of writing crime fiction, but this is crime fiction probably at its rawest. That's what I'm going to say. And it's crime fiction in a form that holds a mirror up not just to society, but to us as individuals, and gets us to consider, what if this were me? What if I were in this situation? I think other genres are fabulous, and they do get us to consider, but as I say, I think the psychological thriller or suspense brings it right to home. So welcome everyone. I wonder if I might ask you, rather than me boring the good viewers with people this and this, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief introduction to yourself. I might come in and ask you something as you do that, but people get to hear you and not just me. So Louise, would you give us a brief introduction to, it feels like blind date now, who are you, and what do you do?
Well, I'm a writer, obviously, and I'm based in South London. I've written 13 novels so far. The last one was Those People, which is set in a neighbourhood not unlike my own in South London. And next month, in June, my 14th novel, The Other Passenger, will be published, which takes me out of suburbia and to the Thames, to central London, iconic central London. So I guess my first books, when I first started writing, I had no idea what genres were really. I just thought a novel was a novel. And so over the years, I've had many different labels applied to me, and it's water off a duck's back. You can call me whatever you like, and I'll just continue writing about things that I find really dark and fascinating.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. And I love the idea of, you can say what you like. I am just doing my writing, and I am passionate about that writing. Yeah, thank you, Louise. Lisa, who are you? Well, I know who you are, but tell us who you are.
Well, I'm a writer and I live in Glasgow, and I'm just about to publish my 4th novel. My first was The Guilty One, then there was Redemption Road, and then my most recent published one was Little Liar, which is here. And just like you were saying, Jackie, at the beginning with your sort of wonderful description of psychological thrillers there, I think the way I write is trying to investigate that dark side and looking for moral ambiguity in stories. So that's what draws me into writing, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Barbara Copperthwaite.
Hi. Yes.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I live in Birmingham at the moment, but I'm from Lincolnshire originally, and actually quite a lot of what I write is the landscape's quite important, and I tend to end up gravitating back to Lincolnshire a lot. But basically, I write psychological thrillers, and I think my background in journalism means that I've learned quite a lot about what makes people tick, but I've never stopped being fascinated by why people do what they do, and I'm constantly exploring that within my books, and trying to, as others have said, sort of explore that moral side of things, ask moral questions, put people in difficult situations, and see how far you can push a character. You take somebody who seems decent, and how far can you push them before actually they go to a dark side that they were unaware was inside them. So I'm quite fascinated by that, and often quite cruel to my characters.
She said gleefully, which is always disturbing. I think, you know, you get a panel together like this of, you know, just really decent people, and if people hadn't read your novels and then they open the pages and begin to go through it, and it's like, oh my God, how could they? I'm just really glad that you could and that you are doing. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
So, last but by no means least, Sara Stovell. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Yeah, I live in Northumberland. I lecture in creative writing at Lincoln University. Yeah, and I used to write historical fiction, but I soon realised there wasn't a lot of money in that. So now I write thrillers. Well, I wrote a couple of thrillers. I've written two, The Exquisite and my more recent one, The Home. And now I think I'm flipping genre again for my next one, which apparently is just women's fiction, dark women's fiction, obviously.
One thing is for sure, I think whichever genre you say you position, oh, my internet connection is a little unstable at the minute. Hopefully I am back with you. You know, the darkness, Sarah, is there in what you write, and I'd like us at some point in our discussion today to discuss the notion of darkness with all of you. Barbara mentioned about seeing how far you can push a character. And I wondered as well, I'd like to come back to the notion of how far are you willing to entertain the darkness, as it were. But I wonder if I might set off by asking Louise, the notion of the spotlight that you place on suburbia, although you tell us you're going to move away from that. And so in the novel, Those People, I think I would have put it as a strapline, everyone's worst nightmare. You know, because for anybody who's not read the novel, the idea of, you know, into this lovely suburban setting, new neighbours arrive, and they are the neighbours from hell, without doubt. But why suburbia, Louise? And why? Because I think you've stuck with that quite a while. What were you wanting to do with that?
I think I'm so attracted to suburbia and the whole sort of the representation of it in movies and TV and literature. It's this safe sort of golden lit place, a utopia where families can be safe and you know, live in such a civilized way. And it just has, you know, it has that American suburbia nostalgic feel about it, almost melancholic, and something that children want to escape when they grow up and that other people aspire to. And so I've always loved it as a setting in things that I've read and viewed myself. But of course, you know, when I entered suburbia, I suppose properly was with Our House, and that was a novel that had a crime, a fraud at its heart. And so I explored suburbia from the point of view of, you know, having such a lot to lose in the form of, you know, a beautiful house. And then I kind of just became so fascinated with it, and this idea that you think you've achieved the perfect life, and but you know, your troubles have only just begun. And anyone who lives on a street like mine, which I live in a terraced house, I don't live in a sort of, you know, big mansion in suburbia where you know, you've got a gated compound or anything like that. I'm literally have neighbours, I can virtually touch my neighbouring walls. And so when you're in that sort of situation, you're
Not,
so close.
but not at the moment, please. You're not allowed to do that touching at the moment.
No. There is a wall of bricks between us. But kind of, you know, particularly in metropolitan hotspots where you've often paid over £1 million for a house, people go and look around, they'll view for 5 minutes, they found their dream home, everyone's in, kids have got their bedrooms, doing up every room and the gardens, and then you might discover that right across the room or right next door is the neighbour from hell. And that was what Those People was all about, really. That you know, it's so cruel, really, as you know, setting up perfection and then saying, actually, this is, you know, this is hell.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to the other extreme though now. I'm going to Sarah and say, if we think about setting in your latest book, The Home, it couldn't be further from that notion of perfect suburbia, waiting, as it were, to be disturbed. I'm interested in why you chose that setting to write disturbed characters.
Yeah, I mean, I've set it in a particular spot in the Lake District that I'm very familiar with. It was partly my own familiarity with it, but it's also, you know, the Lake District is, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but it is absolutely stunning. But it can also be very sinister. But I suppose I wanted to juxtapose the beauty of the landscape with the darkness of these characters' lives. But also, it's a place that's easy to get lost in. It's a place that it's full of danger. I mean, I was going to say avalanches, but I don't think there are that many avalanches in the Lake District. But you know, bad stuff happens. And I wanted the beauty, but the dangerousness of the beauty to feed into the novel.
I like that, the parallel of the dangerous space with the emotional and physical danger that the characters, you know, go through. And I'm desperately trying not to give plot spoilers away in any of the stuff that you've written, because we want people to read these books and not think we've heard all about it. So thank you for that. Now linking with setting then and location, because Barbara, you said for you, you know, that sense of place is very, very important. And often when I interview Nordic authors and we talk about, you know, that extra character that gives you a sense of this, it's not that this could just be anywhere. This is really, why was it important for you to bring in that sense of place?
I think it's not really something that was a conscious decision. It's something that just kind of came from within me. My books are sort of set all over the place, and actually The Perfect Friend, which is my latest one, is set up in Tynemouth, but on the whole, because it's just so beautiful and atmospheric there, so I really fell in love with the place. But for Lincolnshire, because I grew up there, and it's incredibly flat, and you can see for miles and miles and miles. You've got the sea, you've got the marshes, you've got these huge skies, and for all you can see for miles, actually it can create quite a surprisingly claustrophobic atmosphere as well, because you are seen for miles as well. So it's not just about open space, it's about there's nowhere to hide either. And I think that can be, you know, used correctly, that can be quite a sinister feeling, you know. And you know, Skegness is where I'm sort of from originally, well, a village near Skegness, and of course it's very famous for being bracing. So it's got sometimes the wind almost, especially in The Darkest Lies, the wind almost becomes a separate character that's watching and seeing all of these things kind of occur. And I really liked the idea of it opening and closing the book actually almost from the wind's point of view. So yeah, I really think that used correctly, no matter where the location is, actually it can be really, really key. And inner cities have as much to add as wide open spaces. So I think that they are very key, actually, yeah.
Thank you for that, because I'm thinking, moving on to Lisa, that for me, your writing has a claustrophobic sense to it, and I think, yes, because much happens indoors but also much happens within characters' minds, you know, and I wanted to ask you that sense of how you manage to move us as you write, changing how we feel about a character, because we see the reasoning going on in that enclosed space. Why is it important for you as an author to shift us around like that? I mean, do you enjoy manipulating us?
I think when I'm writing, I also have a claustrophobic sense. You know, you feel yourself that you are inside people's heads quite a lot. And I think, like, one of the quotes that started off The Guilty One, my first novel, was from Dostoevsky, and it was, "The guilty one is not he who caused the sin, but he who caused the darkness." And the idea you were talking about earlier about exploring the dark. And I think I was initially quite interested in the idea that all of us, you know, have the potential for that within us. And it's not in a sense of good and evil, perhaps, but apart possibly being driven into circumstances that we find ourselves in sometimes, which then create some terrible things. And I think that's what's always attracted me, the sense that there's not a sort of a black and white, you know, a good, a bad, an evil character. Quite often I have people who are very decent, who then do terrible things, and the opposite, people who are thieves, murderers, who we grow to love and care for, and we can see that they've been driven to do the things that they've done. And I quite like trying to understand people in that way. But it does, I think, as a writer, it becomes more and more challenging, and you then have to think about the consequences and how the story closes, and are you letting people off, or how are you excusing them? Those kind of issues then become quite tricky as as you're approaching different stories, or I find that anyway.
I love what you say, because I think, all of you and what you write, I think there could be a danger, but that's the fun of it, of saying, almost not condoning, but because there's an understanding there, and there's an understanding of, and I hate to use the word human nature, but I think you understand what I mean, that people react and people do, here we have people who are reasonably decent, we all do have a capacity, I believe, that in being able to maybe perpetrate things not honourable. And I wonder, on that dark note, I don't know where that came from, Louise, you mentioned it before, about you didn't purposefully set out to write psychological thrillers. And I wonder if I could throw it open, I don't know if anybody would like to set off on this, but when you began writing, was this the way you wanted to go, or did you come to this via a different way? Sarah, do you want to, because you mentioned talking it's historical.
Yeah. Oh, because I used to have dreams of winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, but I got over that quite quickly. And I wrote. I had a novel published with Tyndall Street Press. I was going to tell you what it's about, but I can't actually remember, which is no bad thing. And then after that, I decided I had this really bright idea that I'd write a novel about Dorothy Wordsworth, the sister of William. And that was really hard. It was based on her diaries. And actually nothing happens in her diaries except that she makes pigeon pie, and every 3 months she washes her hair in the waterfall near the house. And that's pretty much it. And making a novel out of that was really difficult. And William, meanwhile, is off shagging all these women and climbing all these mountains in Europe. Like, I was dealing with the person left behind while the other person went out and had the story. And I finished that, and I sent it to, she wasn't my agent, we'd never actually signed anything, but she'd said, oh, I will sign you, write that book and I'll sign you. I sent it to her. She took about 3 months to get back to me, and then she said, no, I don't like this, I think you need to find someone else. And I thought, yeah, she's really right, this book is the bollocks. And so I sat there. It was a January night in 2016, and I remember thinking, this is a really low point in my writing life. It's I've just spent 2 years, never takes me 2 years to write a book, on a book that is absolute rubbish. I need something that I can write fast. And I had this old relationship, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a thriller out of that terrible relationship. And so I did, and I sat there and I wrote it in 6 weeks, because I felt like I had to make up for the lost time. And everyone was saying to me, thrillers sell. So I was like, right, well, I'm going to do that then. And that became Exquisite, which actually did quite well.
Yeah. So. It is exquisite by title and exquisite by content as well. Yeah, beautiful. I love that you used it in a way, I don't want to say for catharsis, but the fact that you already had a story, a personal story, maybe.
Yeah.
But that you
it wasn't
were
catharsis, it was revenge.
It was revenge. best plots. That. Barbara, did you put pen or fingers to keyboard for the first time, thinking, I am going to be a psychological writer?
No, not at all. I wrote kind of unaware of genre. I'd had an idea. I'd actually worked years and years before at a prison in Barlinnie, and it's a men's category A prison. And I only worked there for sort of 6 months, maybe 8 months, something like that. But it was enough to kind of fascinate me, because all the prisoners that I had anything to do with, and I didn't have a vast amount of contact, but I was working in the health centre there, and all the prisoners that I met were nice, personable, on the whole, had, you know, good chats with them, and it was very easy to forget that they were, you know, they'd committed crimes. And I just never really forgot that. And even in journalism, it was something that I never really forgot, that people, you can't tell what people are capable of. It's impossible. And the worst people are often the ones that come across as the nicest people. And so that sort of sparked my first idea for my first book, which was Invisible. Because it's a woman who's in a marriage, and she's aware that she's not necessarily terribly happy in the marriage, but she can't quite put her finger on why. And it's because her husband is just he's so brilliant at manipulating. And I don't think that my first book is necessarily a traditional psychological thriller, to be perfectly honest. I was kind of finding my feet and just telling a story that I wanted to tell. And it's it is quite a claustrophobic story. It's from one woman's perspective. It's all from her point of view, and it's in diary format of how she starts to realize just why her marriage is falling apart, and the horror of the type of person that she's actually married to. And it really explores, do you ever really know anybody, and even when you're in a relationship. So yeah, that kind of fascinated me. So I definitely didn't go into it thinking psychological thrillers. And strangely, although I discovered afterwards that I had read several psychological thrillers, I wasn't really aware at the time of what my stories fitted into. It was something that I kind of discovered along the way, thinking, oh, that's what I write. Okay, right.
Yeah, the afterwards, so that's what I've been doing. Yeah, thank you. Lisa, has it been like that for you to look back and think, oh, that's what I've created? Or were you very clear for
well, I think when I started, I wasn't even aware of the term psychological thriller, and because of course I write so slowly, it probably hadn't even been invented when I did my first book. I was just I think I've always been very interested in characters, always interested in parents and children, that idea of nature nurture. But I think what developed throughout my books is this sense of moral ambiguity. And so I think that's where that sort of noir element sort of came from, that I then I do continually seek that out, I think, in each of the books to date anyway. So I sort of stumbled across it, but I think the sort of the moral thriller, maybe rather than a psychological thriller, is kind of where I'm sort of heading towards.
I like the way you term that, because I actually think that puts as well a responsibility, a bigger responsibility back on the reader to consider response, that it's not just, oh, this is a fantastic read, but more of, ooh, again.
Yeah. And often people, the readers will decide differently to me, which I find quite startling sometimes.
Yeah. And the comeback that you get from readers from what have you done? How have you managed to do this? Louise, a number of reviews that I've read have very much talked about your work looking at the human condition. Yeah, and I wonder if you could talk to us about in the books, that wonderful array of books that are there. What might have surprised you as you've done your research of just what human beings are capable of?
Well, I think as others have just said, I think that we're all, you can't tell what anyone's capable of, and you can't tell what you're capable of yourself. And I think, you began by saying we're all lovely, decent women, but, which I'm sure we are, but I think we're also probably people who haven't been tested as much as some of our characters. And I think I'm really fascinated in exploring what people do when they are tested, either by an accident that's gone, put them in circumstances they're unused to, or a terrible mistake that they have actively made. And I guess I've discovered that above all else, I think I've discovered that I have huge amounts of compassion for people who do wrong. And particularly an unpremeditated crime, where you really do feel there but for the grace of God. I could easily have been that one who was speeding by 5 miles an hour and ran over that child that you read about in the paper yesterday, or I could easily have just had redness come down and struck out at that noisy neighbour. And so I think that even though my characters are often come across quite callous and heartless, some of them are, I think that I always remain very compassionate and sympathetic to them. So I guess that's what I've learned, that there's very little that someone can do where I can't find the milk of human kindness in there somewhere. There's a very narrow band of horrific killers who none of us, you know, would blink an eye at watching them, you know, on the electric chair. They're so appalling. Most people don't fall into that category, and so yeah. I mean, it's ceaseless. You know, the amount of the variables and the various ways that we might respond to a difficult situation. And so I just feel very sympathetic to those who find themselves in these sticky situations that we put them in. And it's great to be able to explore it in fiction rather than in real life.
Yes, I mean, indeed, you know, I mean, I often and I think, and it's often said that within the safety of the pages of your books, we are able to entertain things that, were we to be watching a similar story on the news or reading a similar story in a newspaper of what has actually happened, that we probably wouldn't want to go there and consider the reality of it. And I just wondered, coming back to Sarah, you know, with the subject matter of the home, dealing with painful, you know, uncomfortable subjects, was it difficult, again, to research and write that kind of thing? Did you find yourself not being able to maybe progress it because, you know, the subject matter was difficult, or was it you just went because this story had to be told?
All of the above. I think it was really tough. It was really tough to write it, and it took me a long time. And I had quite a few breaks at various points through it, and that probably was because of the subject matter. Yes, you know, it wasn't an uplifting thing to write. But it's for the sake of people who don't know, it's about three teenage girls who are in a children's home. And I worked in a children's home in my 20s. So what you end up with when you work in a children's home are the most damaged children who can no longer be fostered because their behaviour is too bad, because such terrible things have happened to them. And very often, you know, children's homes aren't great. They're not going to make these children better. It's mainly just keeping them off the streets. And so, yes, I felt they were stories that needed to be told, because I think stories only really make it into the press when social workers or care homes have failed, and then everyone just throws mud at the social workers. But actually, most of the time, the social workers are doing a very good job at keeping this crap from the public. So the public generally doesn't know, or maybe vaguely know, what goes on, and what does happen to some of the children in the world. And I really felt that it was a story that needed to be told, but it ended up slightly too depressing.
and so it may, I mean, again, there's some very difficult moments in it, but I think what should be said is the way that you write is so beautiful. If you can put those two things together, and what you come out with it's a bittersweet, joyous, painful thing to read. So, you know, thank you for giving us those different experiences in altogether. And speaking of a bittersweet read, Barbara, I would not be where I am today without the amazing women, and some guys, it has to be said, but I am supported by a most amazing network of women whose friendship, you know, I value above, you know, most things. And yet, in the perfect friend, okay, you really bring a very dark side. And the first thing that I wanted to examine was the notion of you bring together two vulnerable women for different reasons, that vulnerability. And, you know, again, it's that idea of the dynamic between these two women is very tricky. do you want to tell us a little bit about that and the decisions that you made to scope your characters in this way? You know, the age difference, the illness, the mental illness, because you could have, you know, those two women could have been, you know, any two women, but you chose certain aspects. Why did you do that?
Ultimately, I wanted to explore within the sort of the dynamic of a friendship. I really wanted to actually explore what makes people lie, the justifications for lying, and are there justifications, you know? And I think what's fascinating about both these women is that they lie for very different reasons, but in a lot of ways they're quite valid, the reasons, and there's you know, some of the reasons are, you know, like a sledgehammer, and others are nuanced, and I found it really fascinating just sort of exploring the whole lies and that, like say, that dynamic between the two of them, because and the sort of the mother-daughter relationship, and I think that women are quite often, they're just sort of passive characters sometimes in programs and books, and I really wanted to bring women to the forefront, and that was another reason why I decided to make this very female-centric. So it's not really an exploration or a criticism of female friendship. And ironically, the inspiration behind it was actually because I was invited to stay at a friend's house, and I was wandering along the beach thinking, oh, how lucky I am having such a wonderful friend, when I suddenly got hit by this idea of sort of toxic friendship, really, and that just goes horribly wrong, but in some ways for all the right reasons, you know. That was kind of the thing, was that it is for the right reasons in a lot of ways, and it's about kind of rescuing. Hello. It's about rescuing each other as well. Is that possible? But yeah, ultimately it's about two women and why they are forced to lie, and that whole sort of dynamic. Yeah, I just found it fascinating, to be honest. And it was partly inspired as well because there are, you know, the setting is within a self-help group, and at the time I'd actually lost two members of my family, and I think that really influenced the setting and what was happening with the two women as well. So.
Thank you for that, and you've given me a beautiful segue with the whole notion of lies, to move lovely over to Lisa and talk about that, you know, I mean, Little Liar, and my question, you know, was that thing of how quickly in the book, and maybe how quickly, if we again consider ourselves, how quickly we are ready to believe allegations, you know, when nothing has been proven, you know, without a shadow of a doubt, or things like that. But, and the other thing that I wanted to ask about was the notion of, and this is the really tricky one, I think, in that book, that what children are capable of doing. You know, you've been there before. And were you never worried that you would receive criticism from writing the child's point of view?
Yeah, I think I was very mindful of that right from the start. And when I was first playing with the ideas for the story, I think I wanted to quite strongly turn away from any kind of cliched idea of a female victim. And so Angela, who is the victim who's presented on the first page of the book, is kind of not what you would expect from a victim. You know, she's aggressive, she's a bully, she's about to be thrown out of school, she's horrible to her mother. And I was worried about that as well, because, you know, you want your readers to like your characters as well. And Angela, you know, I think there is likable aspects to her, but I think certainly to begin with, you know, you don't like her. And so I really was kind of trying to go with that in terms of presenting someone who was horrific in a lot of ways, but yet, again, could have reasons for that behaviour. And then on the other side of town, so we have this sort of the high class end of town and the low class end of town. On the other end of town, you've got this lovely, perfect family, and the police arrive and say a sexual allegation has been made against you, and it is almost from the get-go then about defending themselves when they've still not been to court. So the man who has been accused of sexually assaulting his it's not even his own pupil, he works as a drama coach, but a young girl who's been under his teaching, he's accused of this, and without it even going to court, he then is on trial. His wife's job is at risk. They are everyone in the community turns against them. So it's these two sides, I think were dangerous when I was writing the novel. First of all, that the idea of you know, a young girl, is she telling the truth or not? You know, I think that was something dangerous that I was playing with right from the beginning. And then that whole idea of trial by media, trial by society, you know, that was something. And then, as I was saying earlier, you know, your responsibility as a writer, maybe when you're tying things together, you know, what is your message? What is the morality you're trying to espouse, and how does that reach a resolution? All of those felt quite dangerous when I was writing.
And so I would ask all of you the dangerous aspect of what you write, because there is that in all of your writing. Do you thrill to it? I mean, is there a frisson there? As you write, you know, this subject matter, as you know, as you write, you know, the element that moves into the street that is just a nightmare, you know, and as you write, the dead body that is found by the scaffolding of these, is it? I mean, do you know? I can ask you all of this. Do you get pleasure from writing evil?
I do. No, I do. They're my favourite characters. Are told from the point of view of somebody who's doing something terrible. I find the most emotionally draining are the when I'm writing a nice character and I have to get into their head, and that can be really quite painful to create. Whereas the bad guy's just bad and they're just enjoying it, you know. And maybe that, you know, they've not enjoyed the lead up to it, but at that moment when they snap and they do whatever, yeah, that's fun because they're just in the moment and lost to it. Yeah, so I find it fascinating, and I never feel bad about writing those scenes. But the like I say, the good guys who are going through something difficult, that can be really hard and emotionally draining and tiring to create, actually.
Louise, is that your experience?
No, not really. I mean, I do find, I agree that, you know, the powerful, dangerous characters are easily the most fun to write. And I mean, it all depends on who your narrator is. And if you, the book that's just coming out next month, The Other Passenger, there's one narrator, it's written in the first person. So my exploration of some of the the powerful and dangerous characters as through his eyes. So I think when you've got multiple viewpoints, you very quickly will have favorites, and they tend to be the bad ones, the evil ones, the naughty ones. I think for me, the most, when I get the frisson and the thrill, it's when I have solved the puzzle of the plotting, because the plotting is quite complicated in my books, and there's often a series of twists. And so I think that's what makes me feel the joy, when I feel like I've solved the puzzle and I've presented the mystery in a really satisfying way. And so I always feel like the more satisfied I am, hopefully the more satisfied the reader will be.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like that thought, because not being a writer, and very often you think, okay, so as you know, as an author, as you're writing that tale, and with all the twists, and you know where it's going, and the thought that you get to a point when you can think, I am done. This is it. And I know when you write, there's always well, I could do more, but I can stop now, because I think that's another side to it. So the frisson is not necessarily like Barbara, who likes writing her baddies, okay? But the frisson for you, Louise, is seeing that thing come into being. Sarah, where's the frisson for you in the writing?
Well, it's not in writing baddies, because none of my baddies, well, very often my baddies are victims, and that's quite difficult, because it's the fact that they were victims originally that has turned them into baddies. I think, where's the frisson? Oh, I don't know. Where is it? My recent one that isn't published yet, anyway, I've only just finished it. The frisson was actually in making it humorous after all these years of writing dark stuff. And my new book it's like my Twitter feed. It's like 80,000 words of Twitter, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, there was a lot of frisson there, and also I suppose in portraying the relationships. But the baddies don't do for me what they do for Barbara. No.
No, I love this difference. It's beautiful. Lisa, where do you fall within this spectrum?
I also didn't agree with Barbara in the sense I find it awful writing those horrible bits. I mean, I can think of a few bits in each of the novels have just been terrible, awful situations, and I've personally found it quite traumatic. So they maybe you can write them easier than the sort of more step-by-step bits, but yeah, I don't like it. I find it quite traumatic myself, but I think I get the frisson from maybe some sort of emotional peak, that the characters experience. So I still really like those sort of character interactions and those sort of peak human experiences that people have, and I think I like when I sort of can really feel that emotion coming out. That's what I quite enjoy.
Thank you. I love the different answers from the four of you, that and again it just makes me so joyful to think that writing is a very singular thing, and that there's not one way of doing it, and there's not a right way, but it's that expression that comes out from the individual. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, if that's all right. Because in preparing a little bit for this, and I was looking at that on a website of the elements of a good psychological thriller and tips for writing a psychological thriller. And one of the elements was the idea of the plot twist. Yeah, so it's vital that you fool us, you send us down an alleyway, and we go so far, not so. And I wonder, when you sit down to write, do you have in mind already how many twists you're going to bring in, and do you know where you're going to put them? Well, it's all about process, is it not? Louise, tell us about your twists.
Well, twists are a big part of my work. I think of them, I don't really use the word twist as much as revelation. I think of series of revelations.
Can I borrow that?
that I want to present to the reader. So I will plan, I probably have most of my revelations planned in advance, but what I won't know, and what's always really exciting and creates a frisson in the process, is when one of them starts to present itself to me as one that could be the special one, it could be the big one, and it could be the one that changes everything and that people might talk about and the readers might keep secret from each other. And so usually one will rear up as the biggie. And sometimes I'm lucky enough to have the most amazing publishing team at Simon & Schuster. And certainly with the book that's coming out in June, The Other Passenger, they suggested a very final mini twist to me, which comes basically in the epilogue. And I hadn't thought of that myself. And as soon as they suggested it, I thought, oh, that's just brilliant. That brings a certain balance and justice to the book, which I hadn't necessarily planned or wanted myself. But as soon as it was suggested, I, seized it and will take credit for it. But so basically, most of them are planned, and then their importance to the reader, the effect on the reader will probably change and modify as I write. And then even in the editorial stage, there might be little extras put in there.
I love the fact that you set out with them. I like that they don't just happen. But does it go that way for you, Barbara? Is it like that for you?
Sorry, you cut out there when you said the name.
Sorry.
No, it doesn't actually. I tend to set off with absolutely no clue of where I'm going. In fact, and yes, they, as you were saying, they're not so much twists as revelations, and I'm kind of discovering the story myself as I'm doing the first draft and going along. So I'll sort of think, and then this happens, or something will happen along the way, and I'll think, oh, that's the reason why I referred to something earlier, and I didn't realize why I referred to it when I first wrote it. And it's just wonderful the way that things can come together almost subliminally sometimes. And of course, then once you've got your first draft down, you can then hone things, and maybe different twists or red herrings and things like that can be popped in and will occur to you, and things will be strengthened. But that each book has been different for me, but I think on the whole I tend not to quite know where I'm going, or I've got some kind of end game in mind, but I don't necessarily know how I'll get there, and the journey that and the twisting journey that it will take. So.
Sara, is it like that for you? Are you somebody that it takes you, or do you take it?
Oh, it takes me. I don't plan really. I mean, I just sort of sit down. I have this idea in my head. I maybe have a vague idea of sort of what it's going to be about, and then I waste loads of time writing all this irrelevant material as it sort of slowly starts to take shape. I wasted about 18 months doing that, but I don't know. Whenever I try and plan, it just doesn't work. And then I end up with the first draft, and there's not a twist in it anywhere. And then I go through it going, where can I put a twist? And then I go about 6 twists too far, and then it will start again. So no, I'm not. I don't think I'm a natural thriller writer, to be honest. No, I find the twisting, turning plot really difficult. And then the ending, I sort of, because I don't think about the ending either. I just think, oh, I'll know the ending when I get there, and then I'm at 90,000 words, and I think, oh, I should probably end this. And I haven't a clue how to do it. I mean, it does all eventually come together, but I usually have to get advice on the endings.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. This is wonderful, because Lisa, I'm going to come to you about twists in a minute, but I was just thinking as you're all talking, the notion of you are people who work very hard. in putting those words together. You put in the hours, you do what is necessary. But I was just thinking, to what extent is there an element of magic? Something you said, Barbara, about, you write and you hope that and that to me is something like an element of magic that says, but wait, or here it is, here you go, and going back to, this, the sagas, the old tales, and where did they come from, and that, that you are our modern day, tellers of tales, and that magic's there. Sorry, that's just one of my rambles. Lisa, are your twists already lined up, or revelations? Do you know how many you're going to have? Are you strict with yourself? How does it go?
Well, I definitely agree and relate with Barbara and Sarah, and it would aspire to Louisa's model.
Yeah.
I'm very much, sometimes I say, I should sit down and plan this, and I get bored immediately. It's just like I have to dive straight in. I suppose when it works well, it's that idea of, that F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, the plot is character, character is plot, so that once you're in the story, things will happen. And then that thing you were saying about the magic, that can happen, where, you're writing it, and 2/3 of the way through, you see that wonderful revelation, that Louise was talking about, that seals the deal. But there was one time when I was doing a talk for the Guilty One, and I was explaining that I didn't really have any proper process at all, and that I had discovered this revelation as I was writing. And there was this guy in the audience, you always have this heckler, and he was like, well, I knew that from the second page. It was like my book, but it had taken me 3/4 of the story to realise it, that he'd worked out from the second page. So I guess everyone has their own means.
It's wonderful. Now, I am aware of the time, and readers have sent questions in, so I don't want to miss doing that. Ava Sherman, reviewer, and great crime aficionado, little bit of lockdown life now, okay, to pull on that, because as we're all going through it, have you discovered any hidden talents or long forgotten talents during lockdown? Anybody want to set us off on that?
Table tennis.
Table tennis, yes.
Oh my God. And obviously jigsaws. Well, I can't claim a talent for jigsaw.
Table tennis and jigsaws, a beautiful combination. Sarah.
Yes.
What have you, any hidden talents or long forgotten talents that you've been?
No, I have no hidden talents, apart from I did discover I can eat a tiramisu for 6 in one evening.
That is an awesome talent.
well, and yeah, I started learning to play the saxophone about 6 months ago, and then I put it down for a while because, occasionally you think, oh, I'm doing really well at this, I can play Speed Bonnie Boat, and then you put the telly on and there's, I don't know, some amazing sax player, and you think, oh, that was a bit rubbish actually. So I found that a bit discouraging, but I've gone back to it in lockdown, much to the disgust of all my family.
Mm-hmm. And we should say to people that are watching, if you follow Sarah on Twitter, you can sometimes catch a glimpse of a clip of Sarah with the saxophone, which is great. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So
it's really useful. What I have found is because I started at 42, I thought, oh, I'm never going to be any good at this, and it doesn't matter. And that actually is a really liberating thing, because I'm always like, look, if I can't be the best in the world, I'm not interested in even trying. And there is something very, very liberating about accepting that you're always going to be a bit shit at something. It doesn't matter.
Just enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Lovely. Ping pong, jigsaw, saxophone. Barbara, what are you going to throw into the mix here?
I've got to be honest, my life has virtually remained unchanged during lockdown. I tend to just I draw, and I think the thing I've missed actually is taking photographs of wildlife. I do that quite a lot. I've just not been able to obviously get out and do that. So there are things that I've missed, but I've not gained any new skills. I'm sadly lacking.
Great.
What has happened is that I've been working, because I've actually been ill for 2 years. And so I've actually found that I've been working quite a lot during lockdown, which has been, I've been working more than I have done in 2 years. So that's probably the biggest thing that's taken up my time, is that I've got I've sort of been gradually getting stronger anyway, and I've very much returned to strength, and it happens to have hit during lockdown that I'm at my strongest that I've been for 2 years. So I've been quite lucky in that respect. So yeah, it's work more than anything that I've been doing.
Yeah, so no, do you know, again, it's, I know, people have stories of really, difficult getting through things or dealing with things, but to hear that, your strength has returned and you've been able, to be at that work, I think that's a lovely lockdown tale. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lisa, a ping pong, saxophone?
I suppose all I could say, and I can't take full credit for it, is we've been growing our own vegetables. We've got a little raised bed now, and our garden now has its own Instagram account. So that's about it. But I can only probably take 20% of credit for that.
Take it. I think you take it. It's great. It's got your name on it. Beautiful. Okay, thank you for that. Now, so from Mary Grand put a question forward earlier as well, and it was for Barbara, but I think it will do nicely for all of you. And into Mary's question, I'm going to add an aspect from Susan Heads from the book trail. Okay, here's my little mystery form, and it's great. Mary wanted to know if you had a favourite character in your books, but I'm going to add to it. That is the character that you have to have with you in lockdown.
Ooh.
Okay. Now I should say as well, because I asked this lockdown style question in previous panels, and a number of authors got concerned that they'd have to throw their family out in exchange for said character. Now, you can do that if you wish, but you don't have to, shove your loved ones out on the street in order to bring this. This character comes virus-free, so you're fine, okay? So, Louise, maybe if somebody knows straight away who they were had, because maybe some people need to think. Does anybody know straight away?
I don't think I would want to have any of my characters in lockdown. Oh my God. Maybe Jamie in The Other Passenger, because he's quite a sort of passive, mild-mannered kind of person who, enjoys watching an old movie and having a takeaway. So I'll choose him, Jamie from The Other Passenger.
Jamie from The Other Passenger. Lisa, you said you knew?
Yeah, I think I'd have Minnie, who was the foster mother in my first book. She's a nice person, she's had a lot of tragedy in her life, but she's a good person to be around. She'd be good with the vegetables outside because she lives on a farm. She likes a gin and she plays classical piano. So I could have a gin and she could play piano. That'd be fine.
And you could get her to do the garden work as well. So that is great. Okay, 2 down, 2 to go. Anybody? Sarah, Barbara, do you know who you'd have?
Barbara, you go.
Well, to be honest, I agree with Louise. I wouldn't actually really want any of my characters with me. They're all a bit of a nightmare. And my favourite character, I definitely wouldn't want with me, because he's actually a killer. So that's Adam from Flowers for the Dead. And actually, ironically, he tends to be the character that all of my readers refer to and say, oh no, he's my favourite, definitely. And he goes around killing women all over the place. So I definitely wouldn't want to be with him. But in fairness, he is quite handy to have around, because he cooks beautifully. He's the perfect boyfriend. Cooks wonderful meals, he runs you a bath, he buys bunches of flowers. He is fabulous. He's so caring and kind, apart from his other little, you know, idiosyncrasy.
At what price?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think just that, again, to highlight that was, I mean, that was Mary Grand's specific question. It was to Barbara, who was your favourite character? So there you go, Mary. Barbara's favourite character is the killer.
Yeah.
Adam,
Oh, yes.
thank you. Sarah, has it given you a chance to?
Well, no, I have to agree. I don't think I'd have anyone. But if I really had to have someone, I would probably have Annie from The Home, because she's probably less difficult than all my other characters. And she does know how to smuggle in booze, so that would help. Yeah, and she's all right. She'd probably be okay to have around, as long as she didn't like have a mental minute. But also, I mean, if she did have a mental minute, then it would liven things up a bit, wouldn't it? I mean, it is getting a bit boring now, this lockdown. So,
definitely. I think somebody who might have a little moment. Barbara, thinking there that you'd be with somebody that you weren't too sure whether you would make it through to the next day, in case he, you know, decided to bring out that side of his personality. Lisa, yours seems to be quite a sensible choice in a way. So I think that's good. And Louise, I do like the notion of, you know, somebody with the takeaway. I think that is, you know, because again, I think in lockdown life, the idea of, you know, how many recipes have we tried, and, you know, and you know, we've all, to some extent, I think, you know, try to be some kind of domestic god or goddess and doing all the whatever. So yeah, I appreciate your choices there. I also appreciate the fact that you've been with us today to discuss your work and aspects of psychological thrillers. And I want to just ask one last thing of you all, because very much aware that being in lockdown, as Sarah says, it's starting to get a little bit boring now. We've been here for quite a while. And the effect that has had on people's writing, but more than anything on the publishing industry, and for us readers being able to get hold of your books and enjoy that. So I'm hoping, all things being equal, because I'm ever the optimist, as you've noticed, I believe in magic. and so and you've hinted at it as we've gone round. So I'm not going to do the cruel thing of the elevator pitch, because I think you're all beyond that now. I think you've proved your worth. But the next thing that all things being well, that we can expect from you. So Lisa, do you want to tell us, after Little Liar, what's coming next?
Well, hopefully publishing in October this year, October 2020, fingers crossed, like we said, will be Once Upon a Lie. So that's set in Edinburgh, and it's a story of two best friends. And it's one friend is a struggling single mother, so she's struggling on her own with two young kids, and the other friend has been trying to conceive for 10 years. And one night, when one friend is looking after the children, something terrible happens. And it's about what happens to their friendship because of that terrible event.
Thank you. Look forward to that. If it doesn't sound too weird to say look forward to that, but yeah, thank you. Thank you. Barbara, are you on with the next thing after The Perfect Friend?
Yes, I've literally on Friday, I sent off my manuscript to my editor. So I've finally finished a book. It's been 2 years since I last finished a manuscript, so it felt very momentous.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And it's basically about a woman who she lost her twin 25 years ago. Her twin went missing, so she's 46 now, 47 now, and she gets the opportunity to take part in a documentary, a Netflix documentary, in the hope that it will reinvigorate the cold case, and she might finally discover what's happened to her sister, her identical twin. And then that she is, after the documentary is aired, she is actually contacted by somebody who says, well, I killed your sister. And it's an exploration of she's trying to find out what happened and persuade this person to come forward, and it, you know, is what really did happen. And so it's very much a breadcrumbs situation where you're getting these messages and this interaction, and ultimately who is leading who along a path, you know. So yeah, and I was just fascinated by this kind of 25-year mystery, and it was actually sparked by I was watching a documentary. I've been watching several real life documentaries actually about the crimes, and one was about Jill Dando, and her brother actually said, you know, it's not even about getting justice anymore. It's about, I would simply love the person who did this to tell me why did this happen? And that just sparked something in me. And I thought, well, what if the killer were watching this documentary and were willing to explain why? So that's kind of the route that I went down. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, you hinted at something humorous.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think after writing The Home, I was desperate for some light relief. So I decided to write, well, it's that there are 5 narrators. I won't go into all of them, but the main character is a woman called Rachel, who is about in her 40s. Her marriage has failed, and because she had a heterosexual marriage, and then she met and fell in love unexpectedly with a woman, and it is about the impact that this has on her children, on in the small town also where she lives. She's quite a big character in a small town, and the impact that it has at the school that her youngest child goes to, and the protests that come up about this from other parents. It's called Other Parents. I haven't made it sound very funny, but it is funny in parts.
Thank you. What I'm loving is the notion of the othering as well, with, you know, with the people, other person. It's great. Yeah. Sorry, warming to a theme. I'll stop. You make me so excited, you four, this afternoon. It's been wonderful. Anyway, Louise, thank you, Sarah. Louise, you mentioned the other passenger, yeah, and you mentioned that you're going to take us to the Thames. Can you give us a summary? Yeah.
Well, I think it's the only one I've mentioned that's got a cover. That this is actually the proof. So it's being printed at the moment, and it's set on the Thames. I was very inspired by noir movies like Double Indemnity. So it's very much my contemporary spin on Double Indemnity, with a femme fatale called Melia. And a hero who is among a group of commuters who commute along the river on the river bus. And so all around you've got all of the sights of London. And the book opens when Jamie, the narrator, he's taking his usual commute from South East London to Westminster Pier. And when he gets off, he's met by the police, and they take him away for questioning because his friend and fellow commuter Kit wasn't on the boat with him that morning, and Jamie is the last person to have seen him alive. And so we then discover what on earth has happened between these two friends, and you go into a very twisty tale of fraud and deception and betrayal and adultery. And it's glamorous, but it's also quite bleak. And it's been easily the most fun of all of the books I've written. I've really enjoyed writing it. So hopefully people will enjoy reading it.
Wonderful. I can see how we've got 4 books lined up. Well, we've actually got 8 because we've got present ones, and then we've got what's coming. So I am so grateful for the conversation that we've had, and for the way you've told us about your work. you've brought pleasure into lockdown. So thank you so much for that, Louise, Lisa, Barbara and Sarah. I look forward to when we can do this in the flesh next year, and see what life has brought us, you know, in those 12 months. But until then, please keep writing, stay safe, and see you soon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
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 Bye bye.
Bye.